Yesterday, Minister Ng Eng Hen gave an update on the H1N1 situation in Singapore. And if I can take reference from his remarks yesterday, quote, that H1N1 is now globally pandemic like other seasonal flu strains. We have to learn to coexist with it and gear up our system for the community spread phase of the outbreak, unquote. Just as a reference, as of 22nd June 2009, yesterday, we have now about 52,000 confirmed H1N1 cases worldwide, 94 countries with about 231 deaths. I called for this press conference to explain to parents and the public how we will deal with H1N1 in the schools. As you know, school is reopening on June the 29th, but beyond that, the next few months or this term for this year, I thought it would be very important for parents and the public to understand how we will deal with H1N1, particularly because the number of cases will rise, and understanding our strategies will help the public maintain calm and also recognize that each of us has an important part to play against this disease. So let me give a few points, after which I'll get Chin Huat to brief on the details. My first point is that medical experts tell us that the H1N1, influenza A H1N1 disease is different from SARS. And I'm using SARS as a reference because I think in many of Singaporeans' minds that's the last biological outbreak that they can remember. During the SARS outbreak in 2002 and 2003, it infected about 8,400 people in 30 countries, and there were about 812 deaths. That's if we use SARS as a starting point. I just gave the figure for H1N1. There are over 52,000 cases, about 231 deaths. So obviously the scale is very different. This is why WHO on 11th June classified H1 as a global pandemic of moderate severity. Another crucial difference is how long this H1N1 virus will be with us. Again, using SARS as a comparison, the SARS disease lasted for about 7 months. In contrast, the H1N1 virus will be around for much longer. So in the 3 months since the H1N1 first started, the spread of the virus has shown no signs of abating, not only in Singapore but worldwide. And over the next few months, even years, the number of cases will continue to rise. Because the H1N1 virus will be with us for much longer, and in fact, many more people, we have to deal with it differently. Because the only way to avoid infection with H1N1 is if you already have an immunity against it, or if you stop contact altogether with other persons. In other words, isolate yourselves. That's the only 2 ways that you can avoid H1N1. Fortunately, the majority of cases that will be infected with H1N1 will be like a mild flu, but a minority of vulnerable groups can get more serious disease, even fatalities, and I think Minister Kaur spoke on this yesterday, and they need special attention. So we will need a different strategy to deal with H1N1. And the simple question is, if you can't stop this virus, which we did for SARS, then what should we do? It's not the idea, you can't stop it. Everyone will get infected unless they are immune. The main aim is therefore to slow down or pace out the spread of this disease. Because there may be people who argue the reverse and say, well, if I'm going to get infected anyway, why don't we just get over with? Let's go for these flu parties, as they call it. Well, there are important reasons why we need to pace this out, spread the disease or slow the disease down. It will give us time. We've already bought 7 weeks, as Common One says, to give us precious time to gear up our systems before this beginning phase of community spread. It allowed us to beef up our systems. But moving forward, we will continue to have to slow down the spread of this disease. It will buy us time to know more about the disease and how to treat it, because with time, others will gain experience and we'll gain experience from them. It will give us time for the vaccines to be developed, to test it. It will prevent our healthcare system from being overwhelmed. We can deal with 100, maybe even 1,000 cases, but if you deal with tens of thousands of cases, our healthcare system will be overwhelmed. It will prevent our businesses from stopping. If the whole office falls sick at the same time, you're going to have a problem staffing and manning and continuing your operations. And we want to pace it out so that we can continue life as normally as possible. So because the infection will continue for many months, we don't want to shut down entire systems as we did for SARS, whether it's schools, businesses, conventions, large community meetings, because that's not sustainable, because we have to do that for many months, even the next few years to come. Instead, we'll have to have a more targeted approach. You stop the spread of a cluster when it forms in a general community at that community. So if you read in the last few days whether it was a church or a butter factory, I don't know what a butter factory is. I don't think it sells butter. I think it's a club or something. So they close it down, disinfect it, and then you start operations again. It could be a group, it could be an office, and that's the way that we'll have to deal with the disease. And that's when a cluster forms. Stop gathering, clean up your premises, restart it after a suitable time. So let me reiterate, for H1N1, the main aim is to slow down the transmission, because you can't eradicate this virus. So for schools, this will mean closing some classes or specific schools if there are clusters there. We don't want to close down the entire system, but when clusters form, we'll close down classes, levels, or schools. Because of this, schools will reopen on June the 29th. And when school reopens, for the remaining school year, there will be two main measures that we'll take. One which will be specific to the first week after school returns, because many people are returning from overseas, and I'll talk on that. After the first week, measures will continue, which is to detect and isolate students with H1N1 virus, and I'll talk on that. But let me speak on the first week first. Many people will be coming back from their holidays overseas. Now, when I say many people, I mean that, but as a proportion of the entire school-going population, it's probably only around 1 to 2% who come back from affected countries. So that's the scale in terms of what we're projecting, 1 to 2%. Now, Chin Huat will brief us on the details later, but let me give you the broad strokes. We want to put in specific targeted measures to address this first week. MOE will issue a leave of absence to all staff and students who have just returned from affected countries on and after June 22nd. From this week, in other words now, teachers will be contacting students who have travelled or their parents. They will be told to stay at home and monitor themselves for flu symptoms over the next 7 days from their return. On top of that, screening will be done at school gates for everyone before students and staff are allowed to enter the schools. There will be tighter school security. Visitors to schools will also be screened. And twice daily temperature taking will be started again in schools, and this will continue. For the first week, assemblies will be stopped. CCAs will be scaled down, recesses will also be staggered. The basic idea is that you want to, for the first week, there's people coming back from different countries, so you scale down the activities, give time for the schools to ramp up these measures. Now that's for the first week. But even after the first week, these measures will not be stepped down. What I mean is the schools will step up vigilance measures to detect and isolate those with fever and other flu symptoms. Because as community infection spreads and we detect cases, we may have to close classes, levels, or even schools. And instead of thinking that this is just a one-off, you may very well have situations where the schools close, open, close, because, as I said, this is for the long term. And I want to prepare the public and the parents to prepare for this long and disruptive pattern. It's not like SARS, because you have to wait till finally the disease spreads throughout the community and those who are not immune get immunity. Now, for those who are either on leave or absence, or if they have flu-like symptoms, have to stay at home, our schools are ready to roll out home-based learning and make-up lessons for these students. Just 2 more points. For this H1N1 disease, all of us must play our part to slow down the spread. And we have one main weapon, which is social distancing, which means that if you are unwell, even if you're not sure if it's H1N1, if you have flu-like symptoms, stay away from people. We seek the cooperation of parents to complement what schools are doing, and keep your children away. If you're not sure, don't bring them to school. Go and see a doctor. MOH will give its advisory, but basically, don't spread the disease. Keep it at home so that the rest of the school children won't be affected. And for the first week of school, if you have a travel history, keep away from school and again follow the advisory the MOE would give. Now, what I want to do over the next few months, I've asked that staff roll out a program to teach our students healthy habits. We want to make it routine because this is going to last us for some time. So it will be a routine twice a day to take your temperature and then to check yourself. If you suddenly come down with flu symptoms, I want a situation where children will own up and say, I don't feel well. Well, I know there will be problems there that everyone owns up, but we'll tell them, say, well, look, if you don't feel well, tell your teacher. And then we'll put them aside and send them home because this is going to be routine. They'll be taught proper hand washing, coughing and sneezing etiquette so that they don't cough and sneeze at people. I think if we teach them from young, they will be ingrained, and I want it to be a sort of a healthy habit campaign. The bottom line is if each of us exercise social responsibility, then life can go on as normal. And we need to do this because this is for the long term. I don't know how long the disease will spread, but all these measures that I talked about for schools will continue to be stood up until the H1N1 stops spreading, which may be for some time to come.